Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Today I thought I haven't done very much with Briolette cuts, and so I have some little amethyst Briolets that were given to me by one of my patrons, and I thought I'd do some earrings with them. So hopefully we'll come up with something pretty, but let's give it a shot. So this is one of my design idea sketchbooks that are available on my merch store. In addition to having some useful metalsmithing information on the outsides, they all have this dot matrix on the inside, which allows me to draw better projects because I'm not particularly good at 2D drawing. And so it allows me to keep a record of all the projects that I've done, and it's kind of nice having that in case you want to go revisit something or try to remember how you did something, because I have trouble remembering all of the stuff that I've made anymore. Here's today's project. Like I said, I have two of these little amethyst briolets. I've always called them briolets. If I'm pronouncing it wrong and they're briolettes, let me know. Let's see how big those are. I didn't measure them in advance. If I can find my little ruler. Oh, it's probably 9 millimeters tall by about 6 to about 6 at its widest point, so 6 by 9. And these particular ones, I've seen two different kinds of briolets before. Some are side drilled through the very top level, and these ones have a drill right down the center. So we'll be needing to use a little adhesive to get the wire to attach to these. These are about 20 gauge or 0.8 millimeters as far as the inside diameter of that hole, and it's not very deep. It's only about maybe 2 millimeters deep. So we'll set those to the side for now. The things that I'm going to do here, I'm going to make a little cap to ride up above it just for fun, and I thought I'd do a simple design on it just to give it a little pizzazz. And I made one in advance just to see what it would look like. And so I filed a little groove after I cut the disc out in an X on there, and then I domed it, and then I drilled a hole through it. So I should be able to this is a piece of 20 gauge wire. Let's say this is attached to that. Just right on the top of it like that. And I think that'll be attractive. So almost looks like a little purple pear or something. Something with a stem coming out of the top. On top of this, I'll solder this loop closed here and cut this wire that comes down here to a relatively short so it'll fit in that hole, and we'll glue that on there after everything's all soldered together. But up here I'm going to have a loop attached to the bottom of this, and this is going to be 16 gauge square wire, which is 1.3 millimeters, and I just pulled some from some 14 and I annealed it so it's a little bit more malleable again. So we'll be making that out of there. I think I can do this in one piece if I cut it long enough that this and this is one side of a bend right in the middle, and this is the other side. So we'll cut it long enough to create those, file a notch in the top here so we can bend it more sharply, solder that closed, measure to these points, try and get them exact, file a notch on the inside here, bend it like this, solder it closed, and then we'll overlap them and solder these ends together, and hopefully it'll look nice. We'll see. I'll make these out of 20 gauge round wire, which I have right here. So I think to start with, let's make one of these discs like I did a minute ago. Like I said, I did one as a prototype, but I also punched these out. These particular discs, I have a kind of a crummy disc cutter that's old and worn out, but I was able to get these ones. These are about 6 millimeters. So what I did, in order to I kind of eyeballed the center, so I'm going to scratch across in here so we know where to file a notch is. This is one of those situations where a miter vise jig comes in handy. So we can we'll scratch a line in here, try and get it as centered as we can. You could use a center finder, I suppose, and just mark it like that. But if you haven't seen these are really handy, especially for beginners, because I know when I've taught beginner classes in the past, a lot of times people have trouble getting like straight ends on pieces of wire to make into rings and stuff. So this allows you to get a real straight filed edge if you want one. Or I can actually see the scratch mark that I left. We'll try it there and see how centered we are. But I'm going to use the corner of my half round file. It's a nice sharp corner. I don't want to get too crazy about how deep of a groove I'm filing. You want to be groovy, but not that groovy. Groovy's a little bit before my time. That's more a boomer kind of slang. I'm just a little bit after that. So we got a pretty good X going on there. Let's go ahead and dome this, and we'll see how it turns out. Okay, let's start kind of on the bigger side of these things. You could probably do all sorts of different designs on there, not just a simple kind of X like I did. You could even texture the whole thing if you wanted to. Let's move down a bit. Okay, let's put one more in here. I'm going to use the smallest one I have here and just kind of try to push that center down. I think I'm going to file in kind of a notch at the corner of each of those, where those lines come to the edge, just to give it a little bit more depth, kind of make a little V there. That's probably pretty good. Let's go drill a hole through that. To do that, I'm going to use the miter vise jig again, just to hold it, because it's kind of small and hard to hold something like this to drill. Right in a little V spot for wires. Tighten it down. We should be able to just kind of drill down through there, hopefully, without flinging this across the room. So let's go do that real quick. I'm sort of excited because I have a Fordham lined up. A used Fordham that seems to be in good shape. So you won't have to watch me drill with my Ryobi drill anymore. Okay, so let's get our components that we've got so far. Those. These. Got some wire here, so I need to make two things with loops in them. So let's do that next. Two things with loops. We're now experiencing age-related word retrieval issues. I don't suppose we need huge loops on these, do we? Not like that big, maybe? Where did you go? Wires. I don't imagine those are going to need to be very long. About the same size. Alright, set these over here for a moment. Let's solder these closed. If you haven't been to my channel before, here's kind of my soldering and torch setup. I'm just going to use a little bit of pick soldering to put some small pieces of solder to solder these closed. First, let me make sure this one was lined up. It wasn't perfectly aligned. Alright. Apologize for the lateness of my last video on Tuesday, or Thursday. Was it Thursday? I think it was Thursday. I made little tiny versions of gardening tools for earrings, but for some reason when I went to export my file, iMovie just kept freezing on me, which is what I use to edit stuff most of the time. It just was being a pain, so I didn't get the video out until 3 or 4 in the afternoon, so it didn't get a lot of hits, I don't think. I thought they came out pretty cool, though. They were sort of streamlined, modern tools that I picked up somewhere. I kind of copied on those little tiny variants. So if you're interested, there's a link to that video. Anyway, this is called pick soldering. It allows you to place the exact amount of solder right where you want it to be in just the amount you want. And so it's a super useful skill. So if you're interested, I have a pretty good video about how to do that. The real trick is making sure things are up to temperature before you stick it in there, because then it just jumps right onto the metal because it's the right temperature to solder. So, all right, let's cool those off. I have to say, out of all of the things I've learned over the years about doing this stuff, learning how to pick solder opened up the most possibilities for me. It made soldering so much easier in some situations. Once you can solder well, you can do just about anything, right? We can decide how far we want these to hang down. They don't have to be jammed up against there unless we want them to be. So I'll make that decision when we get closer to the end. I think we need to make our little square wire things now. Okay, should we use something to figure out about how long we need to cut these? Find some skinny wire or something. Here's a little bit. I left a little extra for the mistakes. Because I'd rather have slightly too much than not enough. So if I mark it about there and then we double it, that should be just about right. 10, 20, 31. So let's go 62 overall length. We can use that as a guide to cut a piece of this 16 gauge square wire, which, like I said, is 1.3 millimeters. Pretty close. I'll make one of these first, and then I normally make a third piece just in case I mess up or something. And after I make the first one, I'll probably cut a second piece just to be safe so that I have one measured out and ready to go. Let's figure out the center. So that means about 30.5 from each side, right? I think there are a lot of different designs of earrings where you have a little stone at the bottom with some kind of design above them. End up looking pretty nice. It's hard to go wrong with that kind of setup, I think. I guess I'll find out after we finish these today. Okay, so set this one to the side for a minute. Let's cut a notch with my We'll get it lined up with this first, and then I'll probably use my bastard file to cut a wider notch. Or maybe we'll just use this one because it's pretty skinny. I want kind of a sharp bend. So I'm going to try and make it a little bit wider than a 90-degree angle. If you just use the edge of the bastard file, you get a perfect 90-degree angle kind of sitting diagonally. I don't want to go all the way through because I don't want it to break where I bend it. I just want it to bend more easily. Okay, hopefully you can see the slot there. So that's square wire has a tendency to try to kind of turn on you sideways, so you're going to want to correct that as you're doing this. Even though we filed that notch, it's still trying to find the easiest way to bend. So I think I'm going to solder it kind of maybe even a little steeper angle than that, and then bend them outwards a little bit to give them a slight outward curve. So let's solder that one closed. It's probably good that I'm making some earrings this time because summer shows are coming up and earrings are usually good sellers. It'll be interesting this summer to see with silver prices being so high, you have to charge a little bit more than you normally would have in the past. See how much it affects sales. Alright, let's bend these outwards just a skosh. That looks pretty good. I just realized my forward-facing camera wasn't on during that section. Sorry about that. The sound quality may be a little bit worse on that side. I was going to use this to try and get these the same distance. Looks pretty close. We use that as the spot to do our little notch for this one. Alright, here goes nothing. That's going to be pretty close. I'm going to go ahead and solder that top part, and then we'll be able to position things better without the risk of breaking those off by bending them back and forth. I think for the second one I'll cross them the opposite direction. Just since they're going to be on opposite sides of your head. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and solder this one where they cross now, and then I'll be able to cut that without fear of anything moving. Now I could either try and cut these down the center, the saw, or I could just cut them to where one butts up against the other one. I think that's sometimes easier. Use your saw if you want to. So I kind of jumped the gun on big soldering there by sitting it in there while I was waiting for it to get up to temperature. Ideally, you want to hit temperature before you start sticking it in there. Now we need some jump rings to hook this other thing onto. One on the top and one on the bottom, actually. So I'm going to file the top of this just a little flatter. Let's cut some little jump rings out of 18 gauge. Probably wrap it around this, maybe. This looks about the right size. So the bottom ones I'm going to leave unsoldered closed for the moment. So I'll just solder them on with the crack kind of going sideways like that. And then we could solder them on at the end with those little pins. The top one I'm just going to solder up there, closed, because we're just going to run an ear wire through there. Alright. I'm going to cut a little bit more solder because I've used up most of the pieces I had here. Okay, now stay. The last thing I need to do for this earring is I need to solder this closed with one of those little loops on here. And then we can let everything pickle, and I'll polish everything up, and then we can just glue it at the end there. Let's get that on there. old days I would have just used hard solder, but these are the new improved days, so I'm going to use easy solder. I think we had flowage. Okay. Seems to be soldered closed. Everything's on there securely. You know, I'll get this cleaned up with the file after I pickle it for a while. So everything looks all symmetrical and neat. I also clean this up with a Dremel just a little bit with an abrasive silicone white wheel, just to get rid of some of the oxides. And then I realized it wasn't very flat, so I took my nylon jog pliers and just kind of squeezed it flat. And I think that's going to be pretty. I also, the last thing I just did was I put the little cup on here. And then I kind of estimated about how long I thought I wanted that to be for the amethyst. I stuck it on there, and I like that length. It's just got a little play in there, so that'll move around and make some noise and also catch the light. So I think that'll be pretty. So now I'm just going to go ahead and make the second one, and then I'll come back and we'll make ear wires for them after they're polished and everything, and then we can glue on those little amethysts. So. Alright, I thought it would be good to show you how I do my ear wires too, even though I have a video about it, or two. So I make a loop that's about half an inch in. Then we'll close that loop up. Close the loophole, so to speak. And then I usually grab it right at the top, where the kind of in the center of the loop there. Bend that upwards. So we got kind of an L shape. I'm going to grab the loop right across it like that so it can't move anywhere. And just rotate this around twice. Until it's pointing towards the back of the earring. And if you need to, you can squeeze it down a little bit. I just cut it off pretty close there. I like to have the ear wire on when I go to polish on the polishing machine. That way it gives me a little bit something more substantial to hold on to. When you get small earrings, sometimes it's hard to hold on to in the polishing, when you're polishing. So let's get these polished up, and then I'll show you the final result, and we'll glue those little stones in. And then I'll get some pictures at the end. So I'll be right back. So when I'm holding little tiny parts like this, sometimes you have to come up with kind of jury-rigged solutions in order to hold on to them well enough when you're polishing them. So I balled up a little bit of 18 gauge round wire on the end so it had to stop. And we can just kind of like hold it tight against that. And I'm going to use one of these bristle discs. And let's flip it around so the other side's showing to the outside. So pull that tight. I might just kind of leave these brush finish like that anyway. That'll look nice. Okay, let me really quick show you how I do ear wires. I said I already showed you how to put them on there. Now that these are polished, I'm going to go right at the top of my little twist of wire there, and I'm going to bend them forward slightly, like that. And then I typically find a pencil. This will work. And right about there, I'm going to use that to shape a French wire kind of shape there. And I usually push in with my finger right at the top of the knot to give it just a little bit of a bend, so you get that kind of a shape. Let me do the other one really quick. I'm going to cut these off right about here. So give the end just a little tweak. And then I'll file up the end. You can use one of those cup burrs if you want to smooth out the end, but that's what we're going to do. Okay. There you go. That's kind of what I had in mind. I think they're kind of pretty. I bet you someone will love those. And there's so many variations you could do. You could do all sorts of different designs up here. So these kind of things I think are classically pretty. So if you like movement and a little bit of color and some pretty designs, maybe something like this would be a good idea. I think this is a relatively beginner-ish sort of project for the most part. So give it a try maybe, and tell me what you think about it. Tell me how it goes. Alright, I'll get some better pictures and put them at the end. Well, that was the simple and elegant amethyst Briolette earrings. I hope you enjoyed those. If you did find that project useful and fun, I'd love it if you'd hit the like button before you go. And YouTube has a new feature called hyping, so if you run across that and can do that for my video, that helps as well. It helps get smaller channels noticed, so that would help me out a lot. I think you should also go visit my main channel page. I have lots of videos. I've done 650 plus now over the past 4.5 years or so. I do 3 per week, one on Tuesday, one on Thursday, and one on Saturday. So there's a ton of new content coming out each week, so it's a good idea maybe to subscribe to my channel after you watch a few of those. I wanted to thank some groups of people. I have a group of supporters over on Patreon, and I think they're a marvelous group of people. They not only provide me with some financial help, they've created this lovely artistic environment over there. I can tap into their knowledge, they can tap into my knowledge and each other's, and it's just a good place to learn from each other. So thank you for making it that way, in addition to your financial help. I also wanted to thank my YouTube subscribers. We just passed 28,800, which is amazing. Thank you for that. I truly appreciate the kind comments and the suggestions for videos when you tell me about your story or your metalsmithing journey, or your ideas about how to do things. I learned so much from you guys, and I do appreciate you sharing your knowledge with me as well. I'm sure that some of my viewers also tap into the comment knowledge as well, because there's a lot of good stuff there, so thanks for making it that way. I do also appreciate your financial support, the Buy Me a Coffees, super thanks, purchasing my ebooks or my merch from my merch store, like those notebooks. All of that stuff really makes this channel sustainable so that I can continue to do this, so thank you for that. The video description down below has some important links. There's a link to my Patreon if you want to find out more about that particular community. There's a link to my merch store should you want to get yourself one of those nice design idea sketchbooks or some other cool merch like a mug or a t-shirt. And finally, there's a link to my newest ebook, which is a guide to 2025's tutorials. It has a page for each tutorial I did last year, well over 170. And on each page there's a link to the video that it's talking about. It also has a picture of the sketch that I drew, the final outcome of the project, a list of materials it takes to make the project, a difficulty rating, stone information if it had a stone in it, and some notes I made about the project, things that I might have learned from doing that particular thing, things I might have done differently if I was to approach it again. And so there's lots of good additional information to it. And it's a nice way to have tons of projects right at your fingertips, and a really nice way to support my channel. So thanks in advance if you do that. You can even get a 3 ebook package deal. Get 2023s, 2024s, and 2025s as a package for $15 off. So look for that listing in the merch store too if you want to get all of them. So, all right, well, thanks for watching today. Take care. Happy silversmithing.